Hey there, good afternoon. I thought I'd try a slightly different time of day for one of these videos. Um, and today is kind of another tricky, challenging topic to discuss. And so I wanted to, kind of hopefully engage with it from a personal perspective, but also hopefully it feels at least a little bit timely in this kind of twisty, turny, upside downy sort of world that we all seem to find ourselves in today. So, before I do that, I just wanted to, mention that if you haven't checked out Biz's new video, feel free to check that out. It was great to see them back on YouTube and making some videos, and it was cool to see the time finally arriving. So, all to say, I'm just gonna kind of hop right into it. So, I want to discuss the concept of the shadow. Um, this seems like a real time of the shadow. This seems like a real time when we're all faced with uh, potentially destructive emotional frameworks to engage in. And the world is giving us lots of stimulus, uh, lots of reasons to be troubled by what we're seeing around us. And so it's gotten me thinking, and a lot of conversations I've been having with folks, and even confrontations I've been having with folks, has really kind of put me in a framework to want to engage with this. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. The other day, I was walking my dog Maya, and we were uh, stopping for her to take a crap, and as dogs do, they go where they need to go, and then we pick it up and we make our way. We stopped at she decided that she wanted to poop on this particular lawn today, and so from this place of pooping on this lawn, the owner of the home kind of pulled in as she was pooping, which is it awkward? Is it a little bit of a faux pas? Does it did I immediately start to feel a little bit awkward? Yeah, absolutely. The person started kind of accosting us and yelling at us, and we picked up the poop and kind of made our way. We assured her that we had done so, and we made it up the street, and she was still yelling at us about it. And so I handed the leash over and said, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna deal with this a little bit. So I went back, and the woman was still pretty angry, but at this point, I had kind of come back, and we ended up having a pretty long conversation about where she was at and what was going on for her, and how her day was going, and what was really leading her to this place of anger. It turns out that somebody has been crapping on her lawn and not picking up the poop, and all of that sort of stuff. And I heard her out. I heard what she was processing, heard what she was going through. And ultimately I started the conversation with, hey, how are you? I Can we talk about this? Are you doing okay? What's going on right now? And I'm certain that she had a better day after that. She profusely apologized for coming off like an ass. And I said, I totally understand. Sometimes things put us in a place that doesn't feel very good. So don't worry about it. It's okay. And we, essentially became friendly at the end of the conversation. And I felt really good about it. We went back and we continued on our way. And it's gotten me thinking a lot about everything as I've been watching the way people are engaging with each other now that I'm on social media again. And I'm watching people being pretty mean to each other. I'm watching people being pretty aggressive with each other. And I'm noticing, a very kind of short, quippy, aggressive conversational style. One sentences, very black and white, very coded language. Usually everybody has certain meanings for words that mean certain things. And it seems to be bringing us to this place of dialogue that is almost completely useless. Communication at its heart, I believe, is about bringing ourselves into relationship with one another and into understanding of one another, right? First, we seek to understand and then we seek to be understood, right? We don't go the opposite way. We don't want to make everybody understand us right away. We need to be able to understand what's going on. And so I wanted to bring in another quote by I wanted to bring in some more Nietzsche stuff. Not necessarily because I love Nietzsche as a philosopher. I actually think there's a lot of problems with him as a philosopher. But I find a lot of people using his words in a way that don't really present some of the alternative meanings for them. So the quote that I want to bring in here is, beware that in the task of fighting monsters, we do not become one ourselves. That's a slightly less famous version of another quote, which I also like. If we stare into the abyss stares back at us. And both of these feel like they have a little bit of meaning to me. Both of them feel like they lead us into this relationship with the shadow, with the monster inside ourselves, with the aspects of ourselves that we might relegate without wanting to give it a second thought to the bad parts of ourselves. That lives in the box. We hide that away from the world. Usually, the reason that we're hiding these things away from the world has a lot to do with the way that the world perceives those things, right? So things that typically get hidden in shadow are things around violence and things around sexuality, things around the way that we want to engage with stuff that maybe doesn't really make everybody else around us super comfortable. So as a result of our social feedback loops, right? We're very social critters. As I mentioned, the heart center is all about connection. It's all about that mammalian brain, is all about feedback loops, right? I'm engaging with somebody, they're engaging with me, they give me a stimulus, I respond to that stimulus. So it's all very tricky stuff, because usually for some reason or another, there's a cohesive reasoning that can be given by somebody as to why a deviant behavior can be perceived as deviant. And it's not always clearly understood by the person articulating it, right? It's not always deeply understood by the person who's framing the argument for you. It's usually something unconsciously received by them as well, that they're kind of unconsciously putting onto you, right? This woman unconsciously just got triggered, responded angrily, went into it. Now, I had two choices right at that point. I could allow myself to look into the situation, to see it for what it was, know that something was off, and then choose to be angry was one branch, or I could choose to attempt, right? Because I can't force, but I could attempt to bring light into the situation. I could attempt to engage with her from the place of love, from the place of let's seek to understand one another in this moment. You see me, right? See me, not what you think I am. I'm happy to say that if I left my crap on your yard, I would be a bad person. That's not what happened. But that's not quite enough, right? That's not quite enough for us to understand one another. I told her where I lived. I told her a little bit about myself. I asked her some questions about herself. I could have chosen, again, to engage with violence. Now, I do this kind of as a matter of course, because I have a background as a bartender. I've worked in security, work in the door. I've been in martial arts my whole life. I don't have any real fear of engaging with somebody. I am physically imposing enough that for the most part nobody really tends to bring violence toward me, and so I can enter into that situation somewhat fearlessly. Somewhat, if this woman decided to get violent or pulled a weapon or something like that, I would retreat, of course. But I had a relative level of fearlessness when it came to this particular situation. So, as my aside, my big, sort of warning here is this is not the path for everybody. I am not saying this is how everybody has to do it. Sometimes you got to put up the wall, you got to get out of there. That's the right response if it's the right response. For me, the right response, the right capacity, the right moment, the right opportunity, I decided I'm going to go engage. If I had decided to engage differently and mirror her energy back to her, I would have effectively become the monster. I would have effectively become the monster. And this is a tricky thing, right? So beware when fighting monsters that one does not become like a monster. That's a tricky line to draw, right? Because at what point is someone being disrespectful to me something that has to be mirrored back to them and say like, hey, here's this wall. I need you to stop. This is how you're treating me. You need to see that I'm being treated poorly because I'm mirroring to you through social cues and through my behavior. I don't really like this. This doesn't really feel very good for me. And that's okay to do, right? And in certain circumstances, when you're in certain situations, this was a one-on-one engagement, and so it was fine. There was time for us to kind of feel it out. There was already blatant, naked conflict, all good stuff. We could really work it through. In a group situation, there's not always the opportunity. Sometimes you just gotta go with the flow, or you just gotta say, you know what? I'm not going to engage like this, or I'm not going to engage with this, right? I'm just going to go. So that's my big disclaimer about all of this, right? Not all situations call for this type of response, and not all people should put themselves into this type of danger, especially if you have trauma responses or anything like that. So, this is in no way, shape, or form meant to blame or shame people who can't or shouldn't engage in this way. All of that said, the reason that I feel safe, right? The reason that I know that I can go into a situation where there's tension, where there's potential violence, where there's anger, where there's, maybe a lack of understanding on purpose, maybe from the other side, is because I have engaged with and integrated aspects of myself that I know could and would be considered monstrous by others. I have engaged with my own relationship to violence, my ability to do violence, my ability to manage violence, and my ability to engage in violent situations from a masterful enough place that I feel comfortable with the idea of de-escalation. Right? I feel comfortable, I feel safe, and so as a result, it's now my responsibility to not be ruled by the thing that could otherwise remain unconscious, that could otherwise remain that which possesses me. So there's this distinction I've been making, right? If I refuse to possess something, then it will possess me, right? So if there's an aspect of myself that says like, yes, I have the capacity to do harm, and I choose not to possess that fully for myself, own it, integrate it, observe it, master it, even if necessary, or ideally master it, then it will eventually possess me when it arises and I don't know what to do with it. And for all of us, this comes up. For all of us, we have these aspects of the self that are profoundly volatile, profoundly intense, and we have to be able to step into them. We have to be able to stare into the abyss, let it stare back, and say, I see you. I see you. I am not afraid of you. I love you. I want to have control over this aspect of myself that I see here. Maybe not control as the right, sort of control and domination, but I want to be able to deploy it when needed, and I want to be able to hold on to it when not needed. In the trauma response framework, right? We could view it as like a regulated versus dysregulated state. I want to be able to regulate my states. I don't want to just be the Hulk. I want to also be the Hulk with the control and awareness of Bruce Banner, right? And that's tricky. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of diving into the shadow. That's actually, it's probably why the Hulk in Endgame was so awesome for me, right? That's the fully integrated shadow. And we have this framework, especially I think in the modern era. I think we've defanged a lot of our conceptions of reality. We tend to hide away a lot of things about ourselves that are uncomfortable to look at, and so we have this idea that I have to slay the dragon. I have to slay it. I have to learn how to ride it. I have to learn how to be it, all the better. And in order to do that, we have to be powerful, right? We have to allow ourselves to be responsible for the moment. We have to allow ourselves to be powerful enough to, kind of claim our power in each moment, and then to choose how we respond. And again, I come back to the story. How did I want to respond? How did I respond? Are those two things in alignment with one another? Because sometimes I can say I want to respond a certain way. Sometimes, and this was true for me, it will be true, and likely, given a different set of circumstances, might have been true for me. Right? If something's really messed up, or the trauma's coming way hot and heavy, or the stimulus is too much for me to manage, I'm not gonna be able to respond with as much presence, as much aliveness and alertness and capacity as I did in that moment. Because that's the nature of the beast, right? At a certain point, we all find a situation that presses us just a little too far beyond our limits. And we find ourselves flowing and floating into this very uncomfortable space of like, when I look back on the moment and I say, how did I do there? I don't think I did very good. I don't think I did a great job there. And I was talking with a friend over the weekend, and he's a tracker. By training, and he has a very observational framework, just like me, coming from a more like meditative martial arts background. And we both really kind of embraced the truth of, if I don't make the mistakes, if I don't attempt and try and then observe my response, then I won't get any better, right? So it doesn't help us just to sit in the armchair and say, well, that's what I would do. We do have to get out there and give ourselves the attempt, at least, to put ourselves in some situations, not all situations, but a little bit beyond our comfort zone, a little bit into uncharted territory, and say, can I do a little bit better than I did last time? Can I take a little bit more time to observe, to engage, to be better than I think I can be, or that better than I want to be? And it's such deep, challenging, beautiful work. The mistakes are what lead us to being better. The mistakes are what lead us to being able to learn more. The mistakes are what allow us to move deeper into a self-guided, self-directed truth of the moment. And so as a result, I for me at least, I continue to want to challenge myself more and more to hold that open heart, to hold that open, um, kind of chest center, that inner mammalian brain that says, I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to pick up the stick or the rock. I'm not going to go get into a fight with you. I'm gonna respond with this idea that I want to understand and be understood. I want to understand and be understood. And what happens, I find, is that the monster takes on a very different form when we engage with it differently, right? Because a lot of times, again, just like us, someone's mirroring or expressing something that they received, right? Because the mirror just reflects. So, what's the truth? A bad day, shitty circumstances, shitty circumstances, shitty circumstances. The wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time can kind of do anything, can become a monster. Um, because it's all relative, right? An animal protecting themselves will find the way, right? The squirrel will claw at you, it will bite at you, it will do whatever it can to survive. Not because it's a big badass animal, but because it doesn't want to die, just like you and me. And so we all have within ourselves this capacity to do harm. We all have within ourselves the capacity to control that power and to use it for good, to harness it for service. And that's really where I come at all of this, right? The Buddha said, anger is like swallowing poison, expecting it to kill somebody else. Anger is like swallowing poison, expecting it to kill somebody else. And understanding that is linked intrinsically with beware when fighting monsters, that we do not become like monsters. We become our thoughts, that which we think we become. That which we hold inside becomes our reality outside. As above, so below. As within, so without. And so, as we hold this truth, as we hold these truths, and we step into the work and we look within ourselves and we explore the painful, dangerous, powerful aspects of our animal nature, our wildness, it's important that even though we acknowledge that it's there, we love it, we embrace it, we take it fully on board and allow it to be truly a full part of ourselves. It's not all of us. And this is where that annihilation of the ego that happens in the mind center, the virtues, the wildness in the body and the nobility in the mind, the ability to hold our virtues, our values, our principles as higher than anything, as above all of it, allows that to become our guiding star, our North Star, our guiding principles. Guiding principles. How do we hold our guiding principles when we're acknowledging, I can and might destroy you? It requires a deep integration, a deep well of work, a deep exploration of self, and a union. I have it tattooed on my arm, a union of nobility and wildness. We can only go so high as we go low, right? It's not one or the other. We have to go both directions, right? If I want to aspire to the light, I have to hold within me the shadow. I have to root myself down. Just like the tree, right? Why is the tree metaphor the great kind of guiding principle of my Qigong? Because my roots have to go deep in order for my canopy to go wide and high and tall and gather all of this beautiful light I have to be able to send my roots deep into the dark, shadowy places of the world. I can't push the monster out of me. I can't kill it. I can't destroy it. I can't fully banish the aspects of myself. It's myself. I have to integrate it. I have to become more like it, in fact. I have to love it all the more and recognize that it's not always the right answer. So, a lot of young people, a lot of people early on in their martial arts training, a lot of people early on in their spiritual training, whatever it is, they're coming up against some of these shadow places. They're coming up against a lot of this darkness within themselves, scars of trauma ultimately, right? A lot of these things come to us as traumas, as pains, as profound pain that needs to express itself. Um, I can go into that, and a lot of times it's gonna make me feel like a shittier person. A lot of I've heard a lot of people say like, "Oh, like I feel like a worse person now that I've engaged in my spiritual work than I did before." Right? I know more about myself now than I did. And how do I hold that without being destroyed, without totally sundering all of my conceptions of my positive narrative for myself, right? Because when we're young, when we're idealistic little apes, we are growing and we develop these narratives for ourselves, and everybody's the hero, right? Nobody gets into their story because they're the villain of their own story. They get into it because they're the hero of their own story. And we all start off that way. But at a certain point, we start to see some things about ourselves that are true and unpleasant. And then we have this choice, right? We have this choice to say, oh, I'm not as good as I thought I was. So now I must be bad. And it destroys our inner narrative. It wrecks it almost. And we have to throw the whole thing out, right? Because the good bad dichotomy, beyond good and evil, right? To go beyond the conceptions of good and evil is to go into the truth of it, which is anyone can be good, anyone can be evil, and anyone is capable of doing both things, right? How many times have we heard the story of very spiritual people, very service oriented people leading these shadow lives, these deep, dark, hidden away lives where I don't want to, because if I tell people who I really am, then they won't think I'm good. So I have to keep it over there. I have to keep it hidden, to keep it compartmentalized. Because if I'm bad, then what does that say about me? And then maybe they'll judge me like I'm judging them. And it leads to this cycle of judgment and hatred and fear and pain and doubt and all of these things that are just no good for anybody. They don't do anybody any good. And I talked a little while ago about the concepts of mediation and justice, around the concepts of redemption and reconciliation and restoration. And this is really the truth of it, right? Is that if I become the sword that seeks to strike down my enemies at all costs, if I seek retaliation and revenge and retribution instead of those other three R's, and I think, yeah, because I'm righteous, because I am the good one here, you're the bad one, and so I'm going to destroy you. And then I wake up one day. And am I the good guy or am I the bad guy of that movie? Or did I just make myself into the bad guy thinking I was the good guy? And so I bring myself back to Rosslyn Chapel, and I always see this overpass. The virtues on one side, the sins on the other. You can never tell which one's leading you to heaven and which one's leading you to hell. You can never quite distinguish it. Our evil can hide in whatever place we allow it to be unseen. my righteousness, my self-righteousness, my chastity, my charity, my any of these beautiful virtues can become a hidden place of my shadow as long as I let that which is destructive, that which is unconscious, that which is unintegrated hide there. As long as I make the right victim, as long as I make the right enemy, then I'm good, right? Even in an evil world, being evil is good. In an evil world, being good is evil. It's all relative. None of us own any of these things. None of us corner the market. None of us get to corner the market. And that's not so easy. It's not so simple. It's not so cut and dry. And it's very uncomfortable for a lot of us to do that work. But that is the work of shadow. That is the work of integrating the darkness within us. That is doing the work of making sure that you never become the monster that you are seeking to fight. That's how we ensure that we don't lose ourselves in our quest to become more like ourselves. We have to acknowledge what is. We have to acknowledge what is, right? What's inside of me and what's outside of me. Seek to understand and then seek to be understood. We have to find the way to integrate the monster without allowing the monster to possess us. This is where I draw some distinctions, and maybe one day I'll even talk about my beliefs on exorcisms and possessions and all that sort of stuff. But for this moment, I'm going to cut us off, and thank you so much for watching this long, if you've made it this long. But the idea that what we do not possess has the opportunity to possess us. If I refuse to possess my shadow just might possess me. And so it is not just an option to do our shadow work. It is an imperative that we do our shadow work. Yeah, if you're still listening, I thank you so much. Like and subscribe. I'm going to get better at that, I promise. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram, Wandering Ministry. And go check out our website. It's really weird. I wrote it about a year ago, and we're going to be doing a lot of updates, and we'd love feedback on all that. I'd love feedback on a lot of these videos. What's your relationship to shadow? What's your experience with doing shadow work? Are you a reluctant practitioner of shadow work? Are you a, maybe we'll say, overly zealous practitioner of shadow work? What's that mean to you? Do you disagree? Do you agree? I'd love to get that fight from the internet. I'd love to get some pushback. I'd love to have people question my assumptions here, because I think it'll make me and us much better at communicating what we want to communicate. So thank you. Have a beautiful day. Yeah, see you next time.